Hey everybody, this one is called the Belligerent Claimant. The privilege against self-incrimination is neither accorded to the passive resistant, nor the person who is ignorant of his rights, nor to one indifferent thereto. It is a fighting clause. Its benefits can be retained only by sustained combat. It cannot be retained by attorney or solicitor. It is valid only when insisted upon by a belligerent claimant in person. The one who is persuaded by honeyed words or moral suasion to testify or produce documents rather than make a last-ditch stand simply loses the protection. Once he testifies to part, he has waived his right and must on cross-examination or otherwise testify as to the whole transaction. He must refuse to answer or produce and test the matter in contempt proceedings or by habeas corpus. And that's District Judge James Alger Fee, United States versus Johnson, in 1947. And this is a U.S. Supreme Court case, McAllister versus Hinkle, which is basically says the same thing, only not a small part of it. The privilege against self-incrimination is neither accorded to the passive resistant, nor to the person who is ignorant of his rights, nor to the one who is indifferent thereto. It is a fighting clause. Its benefits can only be retained by combat. It cannot be retained by attorney or solicitor. It is valid only when insisted upon by a belligerent claimant in person. In propria persona, in one's own proper person. It is a rule in pleading that pleas to the jurisdiction of the court must be pled in propria persona, because if pleaded by attorney, they admit the jurisdiction, as an attorney is an officer of the court, and he is presumed to plead after having obtained leave, which admits the jurisdiction. That's why they want to assault you with one of their liars. Your photograph and fingerprints are your property. Do not give these away. Do not sign anything. Your sign manual is your property. Do not give it away. Especially do not sign fingerprint cards or booking sheets, which is really the hotel registry. They're required to get your signature on the fingerprint card before they can fingerprint you. Going to jail or prison is voluntary. You or your represent must sign the contracts. How many years of slavery are you willing to contract yourself into? And that is a summary of case Davis versus Mississippi, U.S. Supreme Court, 1966. Riverside versus McLaughlin in 1991 brought Davis forward and added that unless they get one to voluntarily sign into their Iron Bar Hotel, they must let one go within 72 hours unless they get a warrant or an indictment. However, if they play the psychiatric evaluation bit, they may hold their victim for 72 hours plus 2 days or possibly longer, though now under the so-called Patriot Act, they can hold anyone for 7 days as a suspected terrorist. Who knows what else these morons will pull next? So do not be surprised that once they have you, they'll never let you go. Again, if you assert yourself, if you make it so they don't want to talk to you, they'll not be wanting to talk to you. Okay? All of this is based on the slave. Okay? They cannot put a state citizen in jail. It has to be one of the slaves. Any restraint, however slight, upon another's liberty to come and go as one pleases constitutes an arrest. An illegal arrest is an assault and battery. The person so attempted to be restrained of his liberty has the same right to use force in defending himself as he would in repelling any other assault and battery. Dictatorship is here, folks. Each person has the right to resist an unlawful arrest. In such a case, the person attempting the arrest stands in the position of a wrongdoer and may be resisted by the use of force, as in self-defense. Similarly, a person cannot be convicted of resisting a peace officer in the execution of his duty unless the officer was acting strictly within the limits of his power and duty. If the officer makes an unlawful arrest, then there's a common law right to resist that arrest. A mixed war is one which is made on one side by public authority and on the other side by mere private persons. They're making war on you, folks. This is a dictatorship. It's here. That's why we talk about war crimes. This is Article 2 of the Geneva Convention relative to the protection of civilians in a time of war of 1949. The present convention shall apply to all cases of declared war or of any other armed conflict. Well, hello, folks. They have guns. They are armed. When they even stop you, they're armed. It is an armed conflict, even if the state of war is not recognized by one of them. The convention shall also apply to all cases of partial or total occupation of the territory of a high contracting party, even if the said occupation meets with no armed resistance. When that pig stops you with his emergency lights, first of all, he's perjured his oath, so the first words out of your mouth should be, where's the emergency? Think about it. He's stopping you for speeding, okay, which is not a breach of the peace. He has no court order, so he's turning on his emergency lights. There's no emergency. He wants to get some revenue. He wants to get a royalty. Okay, that's perjury of oath. When he turns on those emergency lights, he just perjured his oath because there's no emergency. He's armed. He's wearing a military uniform with military rank insignia. He's a U.S. citizen. It is an armed conflict, whether you recognize it or not. The fact that he stopped you is proof that he's accusing you of being a private person and a U.S. citizen. A mixed war is one which is made on one side by public authority and the other by mere private persons. This is Article 1 of the Lieber Code. A place, district, or country occupied by an enemy stands in consequence of the occupation under the martial law of the invading or occupying army, whether any proclamation declaring martial law or any public warning to the inhabitants has been issued or not. Martial law is the immediate and direct effect and consequence of occupation or conquest. The presence of the hostile army proclaims its martial law. Martial law does not cease during the hostile occupation except by special proclamation ordered by the commander-in-chief or by special mention in the Treaty of Peace concluding the war, when the occupation of a place or territory continues beyond the conclusion of peace is one of the conditions of the same. So, there's been no Treaty of Peace, okay, under the for example, the southern states, okay? There was no declared war even with the Civil War. There was no declared war, there's no Treaty of Peace, and there's been no proclamations. Now, if you want to go back a little further to the Royal Proclamation of 1763, under that, it says basically that everything west of the colonies at that time, and that means, small parts of Quebec and Canada and the original 13 colonies in the U.S., everything west of there was considered Indian territory, and it says that everybody that was in the Indian territory was told to leave, and anybody that went there had to have a passport. So all of that is under military occupation to this day. Then if you want to go to the war with Mexico, the Civil War covers the southern states. Then the war with Mexico, there's nothing mentioned in the Treaty of Peace with Mexico about the martial law ending. And again, there's been no proclamation. So all of the states that were acquired with the war with Mexico are still under a military occupation to this day. So check out some of my other videos. Martial law is here and has been for decades. We're under martial law. Martial law is coming from the United Nations. Alberta and other Canadian states are under a military occupation. Texas and other American states are under a military occupation. In the meantime, the civil law was the form of law imposed in the Roman Empire, which was largely, if not wholly, governed by martial law rule. Equity has always been understood to follow the law, to have superior equities to turn things on their head. This is exactly what happens when martial law is imposed. If equity is a law, then it follows its own course rather than following common law, thereby destroying the common law and leaving what's called equity in its place. And that's taken from the non-ratification of the 14th Amendment by Judge A.H. Ellis to the Utah Supreme Court in the case Diet versus Turner. There are no common law offenses against the United States, only those acts which Congress has forbidden with penalties for disobedience of its command are crimes. So again, think about it. The only thing that can make a crime or can commit a crime in the United States is fictitious entities, okay? There has to be a fictitious entity. Under Texas law, no act or omission is a crime unless made so by statute. The legislature may create an offense and in the same enactment provide exceptions to its application. Okay, so those are all martial law crimes. Arizona, all common law offenses and affirmative defenses are abolished. No conduct or omission constitutes an offense or an affirmative defense unless it is an offense or affirmative defense under this title or under another statute or ordinance. That's Arizona, examples of the military dictatorship. And they lay awake at night writing these statutes. Okay, this is, again, Arizona. The common law only so far as it's consistent with and adapted to the natural and physical conditions of the state and the necessities of the people thereof, and not repugnant to or inconsistent with the Constitution of the United States or the Constitution or laws of this state or established customs of the people of this state is adopted. So they lay awake at night putting all this stuff together. Everything's an admiralty. A writ of error doth not lie upon a sentence in admiralty, but an appeal. And that's a cite taken from Tomlin's Law Dictionary, 1835 edition, but they're citing Book 4 on the Institutes and the Laws of England, which is Coke in the 1500s. So all appeals are in admiralty. Why do you think there's all these courts of appeals all over the place? It's all martial law. It's the same thing that precipitated the War of Independence. Police use military rank structures, captain, lieutenant, sergeant. Military script circulates for money, Federal Reserve notes, Bank of Canada notes, Bank of England notes. Military uniforms are used by police, judges, etc. The wearing of clerical dress or religious habit on the part of layfolk is liable to the same penalty on the part of the state as the misuse of the military uniform. And that's Article 10 of the Concordat of 1933 between Hitler and the Roman cult. We now live in a nation where doctors destroy health, lawyers destroy justice, universities destroy knowledge, governments destroy freedom, the press destroys information, religion destroys morals, and our banks destroy the economy. That's all symptoms of martial law. Copies of these documents can be found in my private group at Yahoo called Administrating Your Public Servants. For a complete set of YouTube videos with private information shares, a DVD with over 50 searchable law dictionaries, and other books and forums, contact me privately at engineerwin@yahoo.com. Donations to support this work are appreciated. I prefer gold or silver coin, but as an extremely less desirable alternative, I can accept the military script, the fake money, the IOUs, the Federal Reserve notes, the PayPal gifts, the checks, the money orders, etc. Send me an email for particulars. Note, under the law martial, only the criminal jurisdiction of a military court is the recognized law, but as Article 3 says, the civil courts can continue wholly or in part as long as the civil jurisdiction does not violate the military orders laid down by the commander-in-chief or one of his commanders. By this means, a military venue, jurisdiction, and authority are imposed upon the occupied populace under the disguise of the ordinary civil courts and officers of the occupied district or region, because the so-called civil authorities in an occupied district or region only act at the pleasure of a military authority. It should also be noted here that the several state legislatures, county boards of commissioners, and city councils are constantly legislating to please the edicts of the federal government, the occupying force, and that their legislation in this sense is not an exercise of state sovereignty, but instead a compliance with the edicts of the military force which occupies the several states, and consequently are edicts of martial law rule. And that's taken from the non-ratification of the 14th Amendment by Judge A.H. Ella to the Utah Supreme Court in the case Diet versus Turner. The present convention shall apply from the outset of any conflict or occupation mentioned in Article 2. In the territory of parties to the conflict, the application of the present convention shall cease on the general close of military operations. In the case of occupied territory, the application of the present convention shall cease 1 year after the general close of military operations. However, the occupying power shall be bound for the duration of the occupation to the extent that such power exercises the function of government in such territory by provisions of the following articles of the present convention. And there's a whole bunch of them, and this is Article 6 of the Geneva Convention relative to the protection of civilians in time of war of 1949. So there's a whole bunch of articles of that convention that apply for the duration of the occupation. To this day, hundreds of years, could be, potentially. Don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel. Don't forget to follow me on Steemit at Sovereignty International. Don't forget to like this video. On YouTube, don't forget to click the bell next to the subscribe button so that you're notified when there's a new upload. On Steemit, don't forget to vote and make your comments. And there's my BitChute profile that I got some of my videos uploaded, but not all of them. I've also got a Minds profile at Engineer Win, and also my my blog and group or Sovereignty International on Minds. There's the front page of my YouTube channel. The subscribe button is not red, so it's been clicked, but the arrow is pointing at the bell, and you click on that bell, and a pop-up will come up, and you have to check the box and click OK to be notified about uploads. And right now the bell has not been clicked because otherwise it would look like it's vibrating. This is Steemit. The left arrow is where you make your upvotes, the middle arrow is the number of upvotes, and the right arrow is where you make comments. This is Steemit. The arrow is pointing at the crypto wallet profile. The mouse is actually touching that, and that's the little window that came down, the box, and that's where you can follow or unfollow someone. If you think this is for your protection, you clearly have no idea what's going on. Turn in your guns. The police will protect you. Turn in your guns. The police will protect you. All they need is a contract. It's impossible to prove jurisdiction exists absent a substantial nexus with the state, such as a voluntary subscription to the license. All jurisdictional facts supporting claim that supposed jurisdiction exists must appear on the record of the court. Why do you think they want you to sign the court registry or the hotel registry? When you sign in to that, there's the contract. And it's in writing. In doing this, I shall have occasion incidentally to evince how true it is that states and governments were made for man, and at the same time how true it is that his creatures and servants have first deceived, next vilified, and at last oppressed their master and maker. A state like a merchant makes a contract. A dishonest state like a dishonest merchant willfully refuses to discharge it. They're nothing but thieves. They're pirates. Yet still it was found difficult to set bounds to ecclesiastical ingenuity. That's the Roman cult, folks. For when they were driven out of all their former holds, they devised a new method of conveyance by which the lands were granted not to themselves directly, but to nominal fiefs to the use of the religious houses. That's the Roman cult, folks. Thus distinguishing between the possession and the use and receiving the actual profits, while a season of the land remained in the nominal fief, who was held by the courts of equity, then under the direction of the clergy. That's the Roman cult, folks. That's quite the scam, eh? So they get to assault you with one of their contracts, and then they get to decide whether there's a contract or not. That's quite the scam. To be bound in conscience to account to assestic use for the rents and emoluments of the estate. That's taxes, folks. And it is to these inventions that our practitioners are indebted for the introduction of uses and trusts, the foundation of modern conveyancing. And that's taken from Tomlin's Law Dictionary, 1835 edition, volume 2, under the definition of mort main. Assumpsit. Quasi-contracts. Yeah, they lay awake at night with this stuff. Quasi-contracts. In its origin, an action of tort was soon transformed into an action of contract, becoming afterward a remedy where there was neither tort nor contract. Based at first only upon an express promise, it was afterwards supported upon an implied promise, and even upon a fictitious promise. They lay awake. These people are absolute thieves. Introduced as a special manifestation of the action in the case, it soon acquired the dignity and distinction of a form of action which superseded debt, became concurrent with account, with case upon bailment, warranty, bills of exchange. See, they're all talking Uniform Commercial Code terminologies here. This is all commerce. And competed with equity in the case of essentially equitable quasi-contracts. See, remember, it's all under martial law, because under martial law, equity can do anything it wants. Both in Roman and English law, there are certain obligations which are not in truth contractual, but which the law treats as if they were. They are contractual in law, but not in fact. Being the subject matter of a fictitious extension of the sphere of contract to cover obligations which do not in reality fall within it. They're nothing but thieves. Constructive quasi-contracts are based solely upon the legal fiction or fiction of law. Okay, so it's got to be the Satanic Trust. That's why they have to substantiate that Satanic Trust. That's why they need you to give evidence against yourself. That's why they need you to sign that piece of paper. That's why they need that date of birth, that social security number, that government issued ID. We got to start being the belligerent claimant and telling them, no. It is well settled rule of law that he who seeks benefits of contract must also assume burdens. All of the stuff they want is hearsay. Voluntary acceptance of benefit or transaction is the equivalent to consent to all obligations arising from it, so far as facts are known or ought to be known to person accepting. Yeah, right. A quasi-contractual action presupposes acceptance and retention of a benefit by one party with full appreciation of the facts under circumstances making it inequitable for him to retain the benefit without payment of its reasonable value. Yeah, right. This is the martial law. Equity can do anything it wants, and they're assaulting, prison is a benefit, so they get to sell you into slavery, and you get the benefit. You get the free room and board. In doing this, I shall have occasion incidentally to evince how true it is that states and governments were made for man, and at the same time how true it is that his creatures and servants have first deceived, next vilified, and at last oppressed their master and maker. A state like a merchant makes a contract, a dishonest state like a dishonest merchant willfully refuses to discharge it. Why do you think they want a social security number when you apply for a driver's license or unemployment insurance or a passport or any other so-called benefit? Because they need to fabricate evidence. They need to fabricate evidence of that slave so they can go ahead and assault you and sell you into slavery. A kangaroo court, a term descriptive of a sham legal proceeding in which a person's rights are totally disregarded, in which the result is a foregone conclusion because of the bias of the court or other tribunal. They're all kangaroo courts. They're bought and paid for. A judge works for the state, the prosecutor works for the state, the police or witness works for the state. The vast majority of the disputes of the police initiate on behalf of their employer are also adjudicated by their employer, where the plaintiff, the judge, the antagonist, the police, and the only witness, also the pigs, all represent the same party, and since no corpus delicti, mens rea, or acts reus can be produced, doesn't technically qualify to be heard according to its own laws. The state, therefore, is indistinguishable from a criminal cartel. They're nothing but thieves. In doing this, I shall have occasion incidentally to evince how true it is that states and governments were made for man, and at the same time how true it is that his creatures and servants have first deceived, next vilified, and at last oppressed their master and maker. A state like a merchant makes a contract. A dishonest state like a dishonest merchant willfully refuses to discharge it. They're nothing but thieves. Dictatorship is here, folks. My blog is sovereigntyinternational.wordpress.com. My website is sovereigntyinternational.fyi. My email address is engineerwin@yahoo. My YouTube profile is Sovereign Living. My Facebook community page is deleted. My private group at Facebook called Sovereignty International is being deleted. It takes time to ban 17,000 people off your group. And I'm not going to let Facebook profit from my hard work. And furthermore, Facebook is a has-been. I haven't been there in months. I have people that manage that right now, and, so that's where it's at. My Yahoo private group is called Administering Your Public Servants. My Google private group is called Administering Your Public Servants. Follow me on Twitter at Engineer Win. Follow me on Steemit at Sovereignty International. And BitChute, that's my Sovereignty International at BitChute. And I also have a profile at Minds called Engineer Win, and a blog, and the blog and the channel, I want to say YouTube channel, but it's not. It's a similar channel that's also called Sovereignty International Group, my group. The present convention shall apply from the outset of any conflict or occupation mentioned in Article 2. In the territory of parties to the conflict, the application of the present convention shall cease on the general close of military operations. In the case of occupied territory, the application of the present convention shall cease 1 year after the general close of military operations. However, the occupying power shall be bound for the duration of the occupation to the extent that such power exercises the function of government in such territory by the provisions of the following articles of the present convention. And so all of these that are listed here apply for the duration of the occupation. This is Article 6 of the Geneva Convention relative to the protection of civilians in a time of war of 1949. Article 8. Protected persons may in no circumstance renounce in part or in entirety the rights secured to them by the present convention or by special agreements referred to in the foregoing article, if such there be. And so Article 8 basically says that you cannot sign away your rights. Civil law, Roman civil law are convertible phrases meaning the same system of jurisprudence, that rule of action which every particular nation, commonwealth, or city has established peculiarly for itself, more properly called municipal law. Distinguish it from the law of nature and from international law. That's taken from Black's Law Dictionary, 4th edition. So it's all Roman law. The reason they want martial law is because martial law creates civil law, and civil law they can change. Nothing's absolute. That's why under martial law there is no law. So then they have to pass statutes to define things that are common law crimes, because martial law supersedes common law. And so that's what civil law is all these statutes. And the statutes they can change. They have to make statutes so that, which means that they're all the judges are actually bought and paid for clerks masquerading as judges. Statutes are changed all the time. There's millions of them, and you're supposed to know every last one of them. Under civil law, your rights are defined. Under common law, your rights are absolute, and under common law, you have unlimited rights. Under civil law, you only have a certain rights that they define. Protected persons are entitled in all circumstances to respect for their persons, their honor, their family, their religious convictions and practices, and their manners and customs. And this is Article 27. They shall, and then we'll go on. It says here, without prejudice to the provisions relating to their state of health, age, sex, all protected persons shall be treated with the same consideration by the party to the conflict in whose power they are, without any adverse distinction based in particular on race, religion, or political opinion. So they cannot discriminate or persecute you for your political opinions. Everyone has the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. And this right includes freedom to change his religion or belief, and freedom either alone or in community with others, and in public or private to manifest his religion or belief in teaching, practice, worship, and observance. This is Article 18 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This is Article 29 of the Geneva Convention relative to the treatment of civilians in a time of war of 1949. The party to the conflict in whose hands protected persons may be is responsible for the treatment accorded to them by its agent, irrespective of any individual responsibility which may be incurred. So they can't, the corporation is responsible regardless of, they can't just blame it on one of their code enforcers and then everybody walks away from it. They're still responsible. No physical or moral coercion shall be exercised against protected person in particular to obtain information from them or from third parties. So that means they can't force you to sign anything. And when that pig is on the side of the road yelling at you because you don't want to give him any information, he's engaged in war crimes. This could also be used against the NSA and the CIA pigs, or Facebook or the banksters for compelling disclosure of a social security number. Matter of fact, I even brought it up with Bank of America because they had a pop-up coming up and telling me, because I don't have a social security number associated with my account, and they had this pop-up coming up harassing me about a social security number. So I called them up and I told them they're engaged in war crimes and because they're compelling the disclosure of a social security number, and they came back so fast saying we don't require social security numbers, and they said they'd put a stop to it. So they know exactly what's going on. No one shall be subjected to arbitrary arrest, detention, or exile. Okay, and that's what these pigs do on the side of the road. That's the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The high contracting parties specifically agree that each of them is prohibited from taking any measure of such a character to cause physical suffering or extermination of protected persons in their hands. This prohibition applies not only to murder, torture, corporal punishment, mutilation, or medical or scientific experiments not necessitated by medical treatment of a protected person, but also to any other measures of brutality, whether applied by civilian or military agents. That's Article 32, and this could be used, Article 32 could be used with torture, chemtrails, fluoride in the water. It could be used with all sorts of things. This new 5G that they're circulating now is the new way for cell phones. That's probably that a lot of people are saying is a way of sterilizing people and causing all sorts of injuries. This is Article 33. No protected person may be punished for an offense he or she has not personally committed. Collective penalties and likewise all measures of intimidation or terrorism are prohibited. While when that cop is yelling at you on the side of the road because you don't want to give him something, that's terrorism. Pillage is prohibited when they steal your property. Reprisals against protected persons and their property are prohibited. Terrorism is a system of government that seeks to rule by intimidation. Can you spot the terrorists? I see a whole bunch of them there. Terrorism is the use of violence or intimidation in the pursuit of political aims. That's exactly what it is. The war on terror, folks, is a war on you, is where it is. That's exactly what's going on. The taking of hostages is prohibited. Article 34, Geneva Convention relative to the treatment of civilians in the time of war of 1949. This could be used when they force your wife to live in a foreign country because she does not have a green card because they're holding her hostage until you accept their slave status. It is, however, true that in all common law countries and is always and consistently be held that the wife and minor children take the nationality of the husband and father. That is common law doctrine. Everyone has the right to freedom of movement and residence within the borders of each state. Everyone has the right to leave any country, including his own, and to return to his own country. That's the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Everyone has the right to a nationality. No one shall be arbitrarily deprived of his nationality nor denied the right to change his nationality. So in America, there's two classes of citizens, federal and state. So if you're in Texas, you're a Texas national. If you're in Arizona, you're an Arizona national. You're not a U.S. citizen, and that's the argument. The occupying power may not compel protected persons to serve in its armed or auxiliary forces. No pressure or propaganda which aims at securing voluntary enlistment is prohibited. Is permitted, I should say. And that's Article 51 of the Geneva Convention. That's why they cannot do conscription. And see the do-it-yourself, how not to volunteer for the selected service in the draft video. No contract, agreement, or regulation shall impair the right of any worker, whether voluntary or not, wherever he may be, to apply to the representatives of the protecting power in order to request the said power's intervention. All measures aiming at creating unemployment or restricting the opportunities offered to workers in an occupied territory in order to induce them to work for the occupying power are prohibited. That means compelling social security numbers, okay? That's exactly what that covers, okay? Or court rules, when they assault you with their rules and their courts, because their rules are really only for the liars. And so this is Article 52. In case of a breach of the penal provisions promulgated by it by virtue of the second paragraph of Article 64, the occupying power may hand over the accused to its properly constituted non-political military courts. On condition the courts sit in the occupied country, courts of appeal shall preferably sit in the occupied country. This is Article 66. Well, they're all political. They're bought and paid for. The state parties to the present covenant, including those having responsibility for the administration of non-self-governing and trust territories, that's occupied territory, folks, shall promote the realization of the right of self-determination and shall respect that right in conformity with the provisions of the Charter of the UN. And that's the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, Article 1, Clause 3. This is also the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, Article 14, Clause 1. All persons shall be equal before the courts and tribunals in the determination of any criminal charge against him or of his rights and obligations in a suit at law. Everyone shall be entitled to a fair and public hearing by a competent, independent, and impartial tribunal established by law. None of them are independent. None of them are impartial. They're bought and paid for. In all cases, the duration of the period during which the protected person accused of an offense is under arrest awaiting trial or punishment shall be deducted from any period of imprisonment awarded. And that's Article 69. I know people that they didn't do that. Crimes against humanity. This is the Rome Statute. Now, the United States has not signed on or acceded to the Rome Statute, but these arguments can be used even in the courts, because these crimes against humanity, all of this stuff in this Rome Statute are basically crimes that are taken from the Geneva Conventions of the four Geneva Conventions of 1949. So crimes against humanity, for the purpose of this statute, crime against humanity means any of the following acts when committed as part of a widespread or systematic attack directed against any civilian population with knowledge of the attack. Enslavement, imprisonment or other severe deprivation, physical liberty, and violation of fundamental rules of international law. Torture, persecution of any identifiable group. Gee, that sounds like people that think they have rights, okay? Sovereign citizens, or freemen on the land, or whatever they want to call you. That's persecution of an identifiable group or collectivity on political, racial, national. Okay, so they're persecuting state citizens. Religious, because I don't want to participate in their satanic religious ceremony. War is business. Check out my other videos. This came along just in time. I was starting to get worked up. Check out my other videos. Bankster Thieves Playlist, Roman Cult Playlist, Bankrupt Corporate So-Called Governments, Bar Members 1 through 3, Do-It-Yourself How Not to Volunteer for the Selective Service in the Draft, Martial Laws here, Do-It-Yourself No Income Tax, Do-It-Yourself Free Mail, Do-It-Yourself Kangaroo Courts 1 through 15 now, Canada Border Pigs Playlist, Bar Members and their Satanic Connections Playlist. This is Article 18 to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Everyone has the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. This right includes freedom to change his religion or belief, and freedom either alone or in community with others and in public or private, and to manifest his religion or belief in teaching, practice, worship, and observance. In Canada, they're persecuting anybody they call a freeman on the land. In the USA, they persecute sovereign citizens. When a judge is a bought and paid for clerk and it's a satanic religious ceremony, they're persecuting you because of your wish not to participate in their Satanism. When a judge is a bought and paid for clerk, it's not a fair and regular trial. When it's civil, they're saying, and when it's civil and they're saying it's criminal, it's not a fair and regular trial. The judge is bought and paid for, and it's called fraud upon the court. Watch my video. Article 7 of the Geneva Convention, 70, I should say, of the Geneva Convention relative to the protection of civilians of time of war of 1949. Protected persons shall not be arrested, prosecuted, or convicted by the occupying power for acts committed or opinions expressed before the occupation or during a temporary interruption thereof, with the exception of the breaches of the laws and customs of war. So, essentially, if you think about it, what they're saying is that if there's no breach of the peace, they can't do anything to you. And so, again, that's what it comes down to. The breaches of the laws and customs of wars. You can't breach the peace. You can't engage in combat with the pigs. No sentence shall be pronounced by competent courts of the occupying power except after a regular trial. Okay, that's Article 71. A regular trial means that it's a neutral and unbiased judge, and none of them are neutral or unbiased. Warning, this is the standing army you were told not to tolerate. That's exactly what that is. Collective penalties and likewise all measures of intimidation or terrorism are prohibited. That's what they do. Is their military uniforms are designed to be intimidating. The carrying of guns by their code enforcers, their pigs, is intimidating, especially if there's all sorts of laws preventing you from owning guns. You don't have the means to defend yourself against their pigs. If the pigs yells at you because you're not cooperating, it's threatening and intimidating. No protected persons may be punished for an offense he or she has not personally committed. Collective penalties and likewise all measures of intimidation or terrorism are prohibited. Pillage is prohibited. Reprisals are prohibited. That's Article 33. They're assaulting you for the crimes of their fraudulently created Sestake Trust. In Canada, they regularly seize vehicles that are not registered. Same thing in the U.S., actually. And it's terrorism and pillage. Pillage is when they steal your property. When they seize your vehicle, that's pillage. Everyone has the right to own property alone as well as in association with others. No one shall be arbitrarily deprived of his property. Okay, that's exactly what they do. Rights are property. Any restraint, however slight, upon another's liberty to come and go as one pleases constitutes an arrest. An illegal arrest is an assault and battery. The person so attempted to be restrained of his liberty has the same right to use force in defending himself as he would in repelling any other assault and battery. Each person has the right to resist an unlawful arrest. In such a case, the person attempting the arrest stands in the position of a wrongdoer and may be resisted by the use of force as in self-defense. No one shall be subjected to arbitrary arrest, detention, or exile. That's what they do all the time. This is the Rome Statute again, Article 8. The court shall have jurisdiction in respect of war crimes, in particular when committed as part of a plan or policy. For the purposes of the statute, war crimes means grave breaches of the Geneva Conventions of 12 August 1949. And so all of this is taken from there, and you can argue that because the U.S. has signed on to those Geneva Conventions. You just can't bring it to the International Criminal Court. Extensive destruction and appropriation of property not justified by military necessity and carried out unlawfully and wantonly. Compelling a prisoner of war or other protected persons to serve in the forces of a hostile party. Willfully depriving a prisoner of war or other protected person of the rights of fair and regular trial. It's a show trial. It's a kangaroo court. Unlawful deportation or transfer or unlawful confinement. Other serious violations, namely any of the following acts: intentionally directing attacks against individual civilians not taking direct part in hostilities, intentionally directing attacks against civilian objects, that is, objects that are not military objectives, intentionally launching an attack with knowledge that such attack will cause incidental injury to civilians or damage to civilian objects, destroying or seizing the enemy's property unless such destruction or seizure may be imperatively demanded by the necessities of war, declaring abolished, suspended, or inadmissible in a court of law the rights or actions of the nationals of the hostile party. That's that whore in Canada and Alberta, Rook, did. Pillaging a town or place when taken by assault, committing outrages on personal dignity, in particular humiliating and degrading treatment. For the purpose of this statute, genocide, this is taken from the Rome Statute for the International Criminal Court, Article 6, genocide, but it's just about identical in federal statutes, U.S. federal statutes as well. For the purpose of this statute, genocide means any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group as such, deliberately inflicting on the group in conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part, forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. Okay, that's CPS when they steal your children. That's exactly what they're doing. They're taking it from a state citizen to put them in a family that's U.S. citizens, and so they can get properly indoctrinated, and denying them their status as a state citizen. In Canada, they're engaging in genocide against freemen on the land. In the U.S., they're engaging in genocide against sovereign citizens. If they steal your children because you don't want to register them, that's a form of genocide. Crime against humanity means murder, extermination, enslavement, deportation, imprisonment, torture, sexual violence, persecution, or any other inhumane act or omission that is committed against any civilian population or any identifiable group, and that at the time and in the place of its commission constitutes a crime against humanity. Genocide, this is taken from the Crimes Against Humanity Act of Canada. Genocide, we already talked about that. War crime means an act or omission committed during an armed conflict that at the time and in the place of its commission constitutes a war crime. This is U.S. Code 18 U.S.C. 1091, genocide. Basic offense. Whoever, whether in time of peace or in a time of war, with the specific intent to destroy in whole or in a substantial part a national, ethnic, racial, religious group, subjects the group to conditions of life that are intended to cause the physical destruction of the group in whole or in part, transfers by force children of the group to another group, shall be punished. And this is, again, the Crimes Against Humanity Act and War Crimes Act of Canada. Every person is guilty of an indictable offense who commits genocide, a crime against humanity, or war crime, conspiracy, attempt, or etc. Every person who conspires or attempts to commit is an accessory after the fact in relation to or counsels in relation to an offense referred to in subsection 1 is guilty of an indictable offense. Punishment. Every person who commits an offense under subsection 1 shall be sentenced to imprisonment for life if an intentional killing forms the basis of the offense and is liable to imprisonment for life in any other case. The definitions of this subsection apply in this act. Conventional international law means any convention, treaty, or other international agreement that's in force to which Canada is a party, or that is in force on the provisions of which Canada has agreed to accept and apply in an armed conflict in which it is involved. International Criminal Court means the International Criminal Court established by the Rome Statute. Again, that's the Canadian Act. Vid.me shut down on 15th December and the YouTube channel called Sovereignty International is deleted. I made the exclusive content available on my website. I have 2 subscription levels and I accept cryptocurrencies. The basic subscription level is $29.99 a year for the videos only, and the it's $49.99 a year for the videos plus unlimited consultations. Now, there are some limitations on the consultations because I'm not a liar. Well, I meant an attorney. No, I meant a liar. But I can tell you what I would do in a certain circumstance and where to find the forms. Now, also, further unlimited consultations limitations include that it does not include phone calls, does not include babysitting, does not include preparing documents or reviewing documents. And preparing documents and reviewing documents would be like babysitting. So I don't want to see 5 emails a day every day. Okay, if you want a consultation, you have an issue, I can tell you where the forms are and what I would do. The only power that these New World Order Satanists have over us is through fraud and deception, and my agenda is to expose it for all our benefit, but I cannot fight all the battles. There are too many. I need other people fighting the battles and being on point. And so if you want to subscribe as a donation, then that's great. It's a modest donation, there's no doubt about it, but a whole bunch of people chipping in a little bit adds up pretty fast. So it's all appreciated. And so I'm currently publishing 1 video a week. These last bottom URLs are basically my website, where the top URL is where all of my videos are listed, organized by different categories. And so you can use that in your study so that you can make sure and watch all the videos related to certain topics. And that way, because on YouTube, they're not very easy to find. Then also for the bottom link is for any subscribers. It makes it easier to find the subscription videos as well. My exclusive content is Arlington Private Information Share, which is 9 videos. I got 2 or 3 videos on land deed training. I got estoppel certificates training. I got foreclosure estoppel certificates training, corporate denial training, toll roads notice and demand training, invoice training, notice of void judgment training. I've also got revocation of signature training, third-party witness training, federal habeas corpus training, revocation of voter registration training, and I've got criminal complaint training, although there's going to be more because it's can be quite complicated. There's issues that come up from time to time. And then I have lawsuit training. Actually, that's one of my upcoming videos. The lawsuit train can be quite complicated because every jurisdiction's a little bit different, so I'll probably have several of them once I start uploading those. I have other training also, depending on requests. If you have requests and it's something I can do, I'll do it. All forms, files, and other instructions are available for free on my 2 private groups at Yahoo groups and Google groups, and all exclusive content are available on my website, and you can buy a subscription there. The training, the exclusive content is basically above and beyond. Everything that you need to know to free yourself is available for free. The training and the exclusive content is, above and beyond. So this is all coming from the Roman cult. That's exactly where this is coming from, and that's why we need to be a belligerent claimant. My history of the Jesuits is not eloquently written, but it is supported by unquestionable authorities and is very particular and very horrible. The Jesuits' restoration in 1814 by Pope Pius VII is indeed a step towards darkness, cruelty, despotism, and death. I do not like the appearance of the Jesuits. If ever there was a body of men who merited eternal damnation on earth and in hell, it is the Society of Ignatius Loyola. And that's a cite by John Adams, who is the 2nd President of the United States. Within 20 years, this country is going to rule the world. Kings and emperors will soon pass away, and the democracy of the United States will take their place. When the United States rules the world, the Catholic Church will rule the world. Nothing can stand against the Church. And this is a cite by Roman Catholic Archbishop James E. Quigley in the Chicago Daily Tribune, May 5th, 1903. 2 national governments exist, one to be maintained under the Constitution with all its restrictions, the other to be maintained independently outside and maintained by Congress outside and independently of that instrument. And that's the dissenting opinion of Justice Marshall Harlan in the case Downs versus Bidwell, U.S. Supreme Court. You have to understand which United States are you in, okay? The Roman cult owns one of them. And if you get mixed up with that thing, then you're a piece of property. You're a slave. They can do anything they want. And it's all voluntary. The Matrix is real. It's satanic. Why do you think Donald Trump's first international trip includes the Roman cult on the itinerary? Why do you think the Pope Inc. looks so angry in his pictures with Donald Trump? Roman cult equals murder and slavery. Look at the top part is Obama, because the pimp, or I should say the Pope, he's a pimp. He was real happy with Obama. Obama was going to do everything he wanted. And then here he's with Donald Trump, and he's not too happy about that, is he? That's because justice is coming. Dictatorship is here. Adolfo Nicolas Pichon, 2008, 30th Superior General, Society of Jesus, the Black Pope. And it says 2008 to the present. I don't think he's still the Black Pope. He was convicted by the International Common Law Court. Anyways, and so he was under with Benedict. And when Benedict left, I think he did too, but I'm not sure. Master and overseer of the White Pope, Benedict XVI, Satan's present ruler of the world. Go ye into all the world and take possession of all lands in the name of the Pope. He will not accept him as vicar of Jesus and vice-regent on earth. Let him be accursed and exterminated. That means kill everybody that doesn't go along with it. And this is Jesuit extreme oath of induction. The Jesuit oath, I firmly promise and declare that I will, when openly opportunity present, make and wage relentless war, secretly or openly, against all heretics, Protestants, and liberals, as I am directed to do, to extirpate and exterminate them from the face of the whole earth, and that I will spare neither age, sex, or condition, and I will hang, waste, boil, flay, strangle, and burn alive these infamous heretics, rip up the stomachs and wombs of their women, crush their infants' heads against the wall, in order to annihilate forever their inexorable race, that when the same cannot be done openly, I will secretly use the poison cup, the strangulating cord, the steel of the poniard, or the leaden bullet, regardless of their honor, rank, dignity, or authority of the person or persons, whatever may be their condition in life, either public or private, as I at any time may be directed so to do by any agent of the Pope or Superior or the brother of the Brotherhood of the Holy Faith or the Society of Jesus. Ever wonder why the world is so diabolically evil? Meet the man that plans it that way. The Black Pope, Adolfo Nicholas, the most powerful man in the world and behind the plan for the New World Order. The Superior General of the Jesuits, the Black Pope, Adolfo Nicholas, and his 6 generals control the White Pope and the Vatican and the entire list below. The Illuminati, the Zionists, the global elites, the Council on Foreign Relations, the Bilderberger groups, the Freemasons, the Council of 300, the United Nations, the Council of Trent, the Jesuits control the Knights Templar, the Knights of Columbus, and the Knights of Malta. The CIA, the FBI, the NSA, the ASIO, MI5, MI6, NCIS, FSB, DGSE, Mossad, and every intelligence agency in the world are Masonic and controlled by the Jesuits. The Jesuits have infiltrated most governments and leaders, including Obama when he was in power, making them puppets that carry out Jesuit orders. The Vatican New World Order. Herman Van Rompuy, the president of the European Council, stated recently, "We're all Jesuits." He was referring to those prominent European leaders with whom he is developing a Roman Catholic architecture for the future Europe. It creates unbreakable ties, so there's a Jesuits International. Of course there is. And look at, they're just laughing and having a good old time there, aren't they? Wherever this seal is openly displayed, the Jesuit order is in control. That's IHS. And that's at number 10 Downing Street. That's where the Prime Minister of England lives. This is Papal Bull Dum Diversus, 18th of June, 1452. Pope Nicholas V issued the Papal Bull Dum Diversus on 18th of June, 1452. It authorized Alfonso V of Portugal to reduce any Saracens and pagans and any other unbelievers, that means not Catholic, to perpetual slavery. This facilitated the Portuguese slave trade from West Africa. The same Pope wrote the bull Romanus Pontifex on January 5th, 1455 to the same Alfonso. As a follow-up to the Dum Diversus, it extended to the Catholic nations of Europe dominion over discovered lands during the Age of Discovery. Along with sanctifying the seizure of non-Christian lands, it encouraged the enslavement of native non-Christian peoples in Africa and the New World. We, weighing all the singular premises with due meditation, and noting that since we had formerly by our letters and ours granted, among other things, free and ample faculty to the aforesaid King Alfonso, to invade, search out, capture, vanquish, and subdue all Saracens and pagans whatsoever, and other enemies of Christ wheresoever placed, enemies of the Roman cult is what it is, and the kingdoms, dukedoms, principalities, dominions, possessions, and all movable and immovable goods whatsoever held and possessed by them, and to reduce their persons to perpetual slavery, and to apply and appropriate to himself and his successors the kingdoms, dukedoms, counties, principalities, dominions, possessions, and goods, and to convert them to his and their use and profit. And by having secured the said faculty, the said King Alfonso, or by his authority, the said aforesaid infant, justly and lawfully has acquired and possessed and doth possess these islands, lands, harbors, and seas, and they do of right belong and pertain to the King Alfonso and his successors. In 1493, Alexander VI issued the bull Inter Serrera, stating one Christian nation did not have the right to establish dominion over lands previously dominated by another Christian nation, thus establishing the law of nations. This is all coming from the Roman cult, folks. Together, the Dum Diversus, Romanus Pontifex, and the Inter Serrera came to serve as the basis and justification for the doctrine of discovery, the global slave trade of the 15th and 16th centuries, and the age of imperialism. This is a book that I got a hold of from the translations of the Royal Society of Canada, second series, The Lines of Demarcation of Pope Alexander VI, and the Treaty of Tordesillas in 1899. And it says in here, if therefore we put aside the conventional law or treaty of law of nations, it will be seen that modern international law is founded on Roman law and on canon law, which latter was carried over all Europe by the Roman Church, for even in England up to the time of Edward III, the Lord Chancellor was always Roman cult. International law rule. adopted for areas under federal legislative jurisdiction, federalizes state civil law, including common law. The rule serves to federalize not only statutory but the common law of a state. State and federal venue discussed. The civil laws effective in an area of exclusive federal jurisdiction are federal law, notwithstanding their derivation from state laws, and a cause arising under such laws may be brought in or removed to federal district court. And this is taken from a document called Jurisdictional Federal Areas Within the States, report of the Interdepartmental Committee for the Study of Jurisdiction over Federal Areas Within the States, Part 2, a text of the Law of Legislative Jurisdiction, submitted to the Attorney General and transmitted to the President, June 1957, pages 158 through 165. We therefore decline to overrule the opinion of Chief Justice Marshall. We hold that the District of Columbia is not a state within Article 3 of the Constitution. In other words, cases between citizens of the district and those of the states are not included in the catalog of controversies over which Congress could give jurisdiction to the federal courts by virtue of Article 3. In other words, Congress has exclusive legislative jurisdiction over citizens of Washington District of Columbia, and through their plenary power, that's military dictatorship, folks, nationally covers those citizens, even one of the several states, as though the district expands for the purpose of regulating its citizens wherever they go throughout the states of the Union. And that's National Mutual Insurance Company of the District of Columbia versus Tidewater Transfer Company, 1948. So they're using this international law to fabricate evidence that you're one of the slaves, and then they just go, you're in D.C., no matter what. From 1203 to 1805, 50 million Christians died, suffering at the hands of Rome because they believed in Christ alone. They died through Europe, especially Spain, for they saw all but Christ as vain. He who suffered by his death for men to save them from their awful sin. 600 years of martyred saints that history cannot erase. With iron heel and iron hand, the Roman popes rule a land. Dictatorship is here, folks, and it's all coming from the Roman cult. The Rothschilds have been part of the Jesuit order since way before 1776. The Maltese Cross indicates membership and allegiance to the Sovereign Military Order of Malta, a Masonic order created in 1099 by direct descendants of Roman emperors, of which the Jesuit order is a brand. Isn't it interesting that the Pope calls fake news a sin, yet the Catholic Church has been selling false saviors and implicated in child pedophilia for centuries? Dictatorship is here. The Vatican's Holocaust, a sensational account of the most horrifying religious massacre of the 20th century. Well, that was the most horrifying then. I'm sure there's going to be more. By Averell Manhattan, Knight of Malta. Averell Manhattan's the world's foremost authority in Roman Catholicism and politics. A resident of London during World War II, he operated a radio station called Radio Freedom, broadcasting to occupied Europe. He was the author of over 20 books, including the bestseller, The Vatican and World Politics, twice Book of the Month, and going through 57 editions. He was a Great Briton who risked his life daily to expose some of the darkest secrets of the papacy. His books were number one on the Forbidden Index for 50 years, and then editors note this issue 1986 and 2006, the record 70 years. That means it's 80 years because it's after 2016 now. The Vatican's Holocaust. This is a preface to the American edition. The Vatican's Holocaust is not a misnomer, an accusation, and even less a speculation. It is an historical fact. Rabid nationalism and religious dogmatism were its two main ingredients during the existence of Croatia as an independent Catholic state. Over 700,000 men, women, and children perished. Many were executed, tortured, died of starvation, buried alive, or were burned to death. Hundreds were forced to become Catholic. Catholic padres ran concentration camps. Catholic priests were officers in the military corps which committed such atrocities. 700,000 in a total population of a few million. Proportionally, it would be as if 1/3 of the USA population had been exterminated by a Catholic militia. What has been gathered in this book will vindicate the veracity of these facts. Dates, names, places, as well as photos are there to prove them. They should become known to the American public, not to foster vindictiveness, but to warn them of the danger which racialism and sectarianism, when applied with religious intolerance, can bring to any contemporary nation, whether in Europe or in the New World. This book should be assessed without prejudice as to a lesson, and even more vital, as a warning to the future of the Americans, beginning with that of the USA. Averell Manhattan, 1986, and you think about it, he was doing this during the Second World War, so all of this happened before the Second World War. Editors note, an armed Serbia could have easily prevented this Holocaust, and then there's everything that went on in the Second World War, and the Catholics tied in, the Roman cult is tied in with that too. An armed Serbia could have easily prevented this Holocaust. Thank God for the Second Amendment to the Constitution, which guarantees the right to bear arms. Religious freedom and an armed citizenry go hand in hand, and is the only guarantee that this won't happen in the USA. Editor's notice, the Vatican's one world government. Isn't that, gee, that sounds like what George Bush is, a new world order. George Bush wants to start a new world order. It is the Vatican's one world government that doesn't want you to have the right to own arms or to use any means to defend yourself. Dictatorship is here. This is the New World Order by Ralph Epperson. Read the middle paragraph. It was written in 1989. The New World Order will include changes in the family. Homosexual marriages will be legalized. Well, they have been. Parents will not be allowed to raise their children. The state will. They steal people's children. All women will be employed by the state, not allowed to be homemakers. Divorce will become exceedingly easy, and monogamous marriage will be slowly phased out. The workplace, the government will become the owner of the factors of production. Well, it is. The private ownership of property will be outlawed. Religion will be outlawed. Believers will either be eliminated or imprisoned. And there will be a new religion, the worship of man and his mind. All will believe in the new religion. That's coming. Jewish Encyclopedia, Rothschilds are the guardians of the papal treasure. This is page 497, and the top highlighted area says the Semitic influence of the Rothschilds. Meanwhile, the nationalists and reactionary forces in France desired to counterbalance the Semitic influence of the Rothschilds by establishing a banking concern that should be essentially Catholic. And then if you go down to the bottom area where the arrow is pointing at, it is a somewhat curious sequel to the attempt to set up the Catholic competitor to the Rothschilds, that at the present time the latter, the Rothschilds, are the guardians of the papal treasure. So the Rothschilds are all tied into it. This is the Rothschild Central Bank. This is all coming from the Roman cult. In the United States is third in murders throughout the world. If you remove number 1, Chicago, number 2, Detroit, number 3, Washington, D.C., number 4, St. Louis, and number 5, New Orleans, the United States is then 189th out of 193 countries in the entire world. P.S. All 5 cities have strict gun control laws. And there is my kind of girl. Boy, gorgeous thing. Got a gorgeous weapon in her hand, and I hope she knows how to use it. Wars, when your government tells you who the enemy is. Revolution is when you figure it out for yourself. When liberty and freedom are at stake, your silence isn't golden, it's yellow. We have to be belligerent claimants. That's the only thing we can be. It's the only way. And if you're not, then you're going to be dead. Okay? You'll be a slave or dead. One of the two. And so you have to decide. Thanks for watching. Have a great day.